"You're nothing but a burden, Mom. Always have been." With those 9 words, spoken by my only son at his wedding, my world shattered. But from that public humiliation came an awakening that would transform me from invisible to unstoppable. They wanted my money, my property, my submission, but instead, they unlocked a woman they never knew existed. This is the story of how betrayal became my salvation, and how my quiet revenge restored not only my dignity, but my very soul. Subscribe now, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. This journey might just change your life too. The crystal champagne glass shattered in my hand as Robert's words echoed through the suddenly silent reception hall. 300 guests froze mid-conversation, all eyes turning to me, the mother of the groom, standing alone as blood from my cut palm stained the silk tablecloth crimson. "You're nothing but a weight, Mom. Always have been. My name is Martha Sullivan." At 71, I thought I'd experienced every kind of pain life could offer. Losing my husband too young, raising a child alone, working double shifts until my feet bled. But nothing had prepared me for this moment, when the son I'd sacrificed everything for revealed what he truly thought of me. 3 weeks before the wedding disaster, I stood on the deck of my newly purchased beach house in Rhode Island. This property represented 30 years of sacrifice, second jobs, skipped vacations, clothes from thrift stores. The small blue Cape Cod with weathered shutters had been my personal Everest, and I'd finally reached its summit. "It's perfect," I whispered to the ghost of James, my husband gone 10 years now. "Robert and Vanessa will have a beautiful life here." The real estate agent had called it a $1 million view on a nurse's salary miracle. This house would be my legacy, my gift to my only son and his new bride, a debt-free start to their married life. My phone rang, Robert's name flashing on the screen. "Mom," he said without preamble, "we need to talk about the wedding seating. Vanessa's parents are concerned about the head table arrangement." "Oh, I thought we'd settled. They think it might be better if you sit with the extended family at table 19. Table 19, the farthest table from the head table, tucked near the kitchen doors. "I see," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "If that's what Vanessa wants, it's just seating, Mom. Don't make it a thing. Oh, and about your dress. Vanessa's mother thought the blue might clash with the wedding colors in photos. Could you maybe wear something more neutral?" The blue dress I'd splurged on. My first new dress in 3 years. That had been the theme all weekend. Whatever makes the bride happy. I'd spent the morning arranging lily boutonnieres despite my arthritis pain. No complaining. Not today. Not on Robert's special day. "Mom, can you not hover?" "Vanessa's family has hired professionals for everything," Robert had said, with an edge I pretended not to hear. Now at the reception, I sat at my reassigned table in the far corner, thinking about that beach house, my gift to Robert and Vanessa. I'd worked extra shifts for decades to give my son something special to start his married life. When I finally approached the head table, Robert was on his 4th glass of champagne. "Robert, honey," I said softly, "I wanted to share a little Sullivan family tradition. Your father always said—" "Mom," his interruption was sharp enough to turn heads. "Can you just not? Not everything has to be about Dad or some ancient family tradition. I just thought you'd make this about you." Again. Vanessa's father was tapping a glass, calling for attention. The room quieted. "A toast," someone called. "Yes, a toast," Robert stood unsteadily. "To my beautiful wife and her amazing family who put together this perfect day." He turned to me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And to my mother, who just can't help but try to insert herself where she isn't needed." A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. "You know, Mom," he continued, louder now, "not every moment of my life needs your input. You don't have to try so hard all the time. It's exhausting for everyone." I felt my cheeks burning. "Robert, You're not helping, Mom. You're not adding anything. You're not anything but a weight, Mom. Always have been." That's when the champagne glass shattered in my grip. The silence was deafening. I could feel 300 pairs of eyes on me, see Vanessa's mortified expression, not at what Robert had said, but at the scene he was causing. A tear slid down my cheek, but I kept my spine straight, the way my mother had taught me. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I whispered, my voice steadier than I felt. "I love you, Robert. Always will." Then I smiled, the kind of smile women of my generation perfected, the one that hides earthquakes beneath its surface. I nodded politely to Vanessa's parents, turned and walked steadily toward the exit, past tables of wide-eyed guests, past the life I thought I knew. Outside, I looked up at the stars, wondering how many times I could rebuild my life from scratch. First when James died, leaving me with a 3-year-old, and now this new knowledge that the center of my world saw me as nothing but a burden, a weight. If only he knew just how light I could become. The morning after Robert's wedding, I returned to my modest 2-bedroom home in Hartford. The silence felt almost like relief after yesterday's emotional storm. I hung my beige dress in the closet, knowing I'd never wear it again. Some clothes carry memories too painful to revisit. My routine resumed, as if nothing had happened. Monday morning, I drove to Oak Ridge Senior Living Center, where I volunteered 3 days a week. After 40 years of nursing, caring for others was woven into the fabric of who I was. "Martha, how was the wedding?" Nancy, the receptionist, asked as I signed in. "Beautiful," I replied with my practiced smile. "Everything was just beautiful." "Is that a cut on your hand?" she asked, eyeing my bandaged palm. "Just a little accident with a champagne glass. Hazards of celebrating." I spent the morning reading to Mr. Abernathy, who was losing his eyesight but still loved John Grisham novels, and helping Mrs. Wilson write letters to her grandchildren. Their genuine gratitude provided comfort in its simplicity. When I returned home, the answering machine was blinking. My heart leapt. Perhaps Robert was calling to apologize. I pressed play. "Mom, it's me." His voice sounded strained. "Vanessa and I have been talking, and with the honeymoon and then settling into the new place, we won't be able to make Thanksgiving this year. I know you were planning something, but it's just not going to work. Sorry." The message ended abruptly. No mention of the wedding incident, no acknowledgement of the hurt, and now Thanksgiving, the 3rd family holiday in a row they'd canceled. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the phone. The silence of my home suddenly felt less like peace and more like abandonment. The doorbell rang, startling me. Ellen Henderson from next door stood there, holding a casserole dish. "Tom and I are having a little dinner tonight. Nothing fancy, just some friends. We'd love if you'd join us." For a moment, I considered it. The Hendersons had been kind neighbors for years. But Robert's words echoed. "You're not anything but a weight." "That's very sweet, Ellen, but I'm quite tired from the wedding weekend," I said. "Another time?" After she left, I wandered into my home office where I kept the family albums. I pulled one from the shelf, Robert's childhood years. There he was at 7, missing his front teeth in his school picture. And at 10, proudly holding the science fair trophy I'd helped him earn, staying up late for weeks after my hospital shifts. There were photos from every school play. I'd never missed one, even driving through snowstorms to be there. Pictures from fishing trips after James died, trying to fill both parental roles. Christmases where I'd worked extra shifts to ensure presence under the tree, even in the lean years. The contrast between these memories and yesterday's public humiliation was jarring. Had my devotion been nothing but an annoyance to him? The phone rang. I answered, hoping against hope. "Martha, it's Sarah from the book club. We missed you last week." "I'm sorry, I had wedding preparations," I said. "Of course. How was it?" "Lovely," I lied. Everything was lovely. After hanging up, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something purely for myself. Book club had been my one indulgence, and I'd missed 3 meetings in a row helping with wedding details. I walked to my bedroom mirror. When had those lines appeared around my eyes? When had my hair become this silver gray? Somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible, not just to Robert, but to myself. The setting sun cast long shadows as I opened my closet. Pushed to the back was a box of James's things I'd never been able to part with. Inside was his watch, his favorite sweater, and a small velvet box containing the pearl earrings he'd given me on our 10th anniversary. "You're the strongest woman I know, Martha," he'd said then. "Don't ever forget that." I put the earrings on and looked in the mirror again. Behind the tired eyes of a woman who'd been told she was a burden was someone else, someone who had survived loss, raised a child alone, cared for countless patients, and kept going when it would have been easier to give up. The phone rang again. This time it was my attorney, Mr. Patterson. "Martha, just confirming our appointment tomorrow to finalize the transfer paperwork for the beach house. Robert mentioned he and Vanessa would be joining us." "Yes," I said, touching one of the pearl earrings. I'll be there. As I hung up, I thought about the beach house, my final gift to the son who saw me as nothing but a weight. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my entire life lifting others up, only to be told I was dragging them down. Tomorrow, I would sign away the culmination of decades of sacrifice. And then what? Continue to shrink myself, making my existence as unobtrusive as possible? The bedroom grew darker as night fell, but I made no move to turn on the lights. In the shadows, a thought began taking shape. Small at first, then growing bolder. What if this wasn't the end of my story, but the beginning? I wore my best navy blue suit to Mr. Patterson's office the next morning. It was outdated, purchased for James's funeral 10 years ago, but it still fit. And somehow its formality gave me strength. I'd carefully bandaged my cut palm and applied enough makeup to hide evidence of another sleepless night. The law offices of Patterson and Associates occupied the third floor of one of Hartford's older buildings, all polished wood and brass fixtures. Mr. Patterson had handled our family's modest legal matters for 30 years. He'd drawn up James's will, helped with Robert's college loan paperwork, and now he would transfer ownership of my beach house, my life savings in real estate form, to my son. "Martha, good to see you," Mr. Patterson said, rising to greet me. "You're early. Robert and Vanessa haven't arrived yet." "I wanted a moment to review the paperwork myself," I explained. He nodded, shuffling through a folder. "Martha, about the wedding." "It's water under the bridge," I interrupted, not wanting his pity. "Is it?" His eyes studied me carefully. "Martha, I've known you for 30 years. I was there when James passed. I've watched you sacrifice everything for Robert. And after what happened at the wedding, I have to ask, are you certain about this transfer? The beach house represents your retirement security." "I have my pension," I said reflexively. And my home is paid off. This is a substantial asset. Once transferred, it's gone. Irrevocable." He leaned forward. "Given recent events, perhaps a trust with conditions might be more prudent." The idea of attaching strings to my gift felt manipulative. Robert was just stressed about the wedding. It wasn't really him speaking. Mr. Patterson didn't look convinced, but led me to a sunlit conference room with documents ready for signatures. I settled at the large table, spreading out the papers before me. The property deed, transfer forms, tax documents, all waiting to make official the giving away of my dreams. The beach house had been my personal goal for over 30 years. I'd first seen it during a rare weekend away with a nursing colleague. A small, weathered Cape Cod with blue shutters, perched on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic in South Kingstown, Rhode Island. I'd fallen in love with its wraparound porch and the sound of waves crashing below. Someday, I'd promised myself, and I'd worked for that someday, picking up holiday shifts when other nurses wanted time off, brown bagging lunches while colleagues ordered takeout, driving the same Volvo for 20 years. Last year, when the house finally came on the market again, I'd been ready. The down payment represented every extra penny I'd saved since James died. The mortgage was manageable with my pension, though it meant no travel or luxuries in my retirement years. Worth it, I'd thought, picturing Robert and Vanessa starting their family there, my future grandchildren building sandcastles on the beach below. I was so lost in these thoughts that I almost missed the sound of familiar voices in the hallway. The door to the adjacent conference room must have been left ajar, because Robert's voice carried clearly into my room. "Is this going to take long? I have a meeting at 2. "Stop rushing," came Vanessa's voice. "This is important. Once we have the deed, we need to move quickly with the realtor." A chill ran through me. "Realtor? I still think we should wait a few months before selling," Robert said, his voice lower. "It might look suspicious. Why wait? The market is hot right now, and that real estate agent said we could get at least 30% above what your mother paid. That's enough for the down payment on the house in Westport and a decent honeymoon." I sat frozen, my hand clutching a pen so tightly my knuckles whitened. "She'll be hurt if she finds out we're selling it immediately," Robert said, though he didn't sound particularly concerned. Vanessa laughed, a sound I once thought charming, but now sent ice through my veins. "She won't find out. Besides, what's she going to do with all that money anyway? She's almost at retirement age. This way the house benefits people who can really enjoy it." "You're right," Robert agreed. "And we need to start planning for her future care. That senior living place we saw last month has reasonable rates for the state-subsidized wing." "Exactly. The beach house money will set us up, and we won't have to worry about supporting her later. She never has to know, Robert said. She'll sign today, we'll make the right appreciative noises, and by summer, we'll be in our new place. I couldn't breathe. The documents before me blurred as tears filled my eyes. And think how much we'll save when we move her into that state home, Vanessa continued. The beach house basically pays for our future and solves your mom problem in one go. My mom problem, Robert repeated with a chuckle. That's one way to put it. I must have made a sound because their voices suddenly stopped. I gathered the papers with trembling hands and moved silently to the door. Mr. Patterson was coming down the hallway. Martha, are you all right? You look pale. I'm not feeling well, I managed to say. I need to reschedule. Please let Robert know I had to leave. Outside, the autumn air felt sharp in my lungs. I walked blindly, with no destination in mind, just the need to put distance between myself and the truth. My son, my only child, saw me as a problem to be solved, a chess piece to be moved, where convenient. I found myself in Bushnell Park, sitting on a bench beneath a maple tree blazing with orange leaves. An older man was feeding squirrels nearby. You look like you've seen a ghost, miss, he said, offering me a kind smile. Perhaps I have, I replied, the ghost of who I thought my family was. As the afternoon light filtered through the maple leaves, I made a decision. I would go home and open James's box, the one he'd left with the instruction, open when you need guidance. What I didn't know then was that opening that box wouldn't just change my day or my month. It would change everything. The drive home from Hartford was a blur. Traffic lights, stop signs, other cars. They all passed in a haze as Robert and Vanessa's words echoed in my mind. Mom problem. State home. She never has to know. My house looked different when I pulled into the driveway. Smaller somehow, as if it too had diminished in importance. For 30 years this modest colonial had been my anchor, the place I'd raised Robert, the keeper of our family memories. Now it felt like just another asset they were waiting to liquidate. I made myself a cup of tea, adding a splash of the brandy James used to favor. My hands were still shaking. The call came as I knew it would, Robert's name flashing on my caller ID. I let it go to voicemail. Mom, where did you go? Patterson said you weren't feeling well. Call me back. We need to reschedule about the house. Of course, that's what concerned him. The house. I walked upstairs to my bedroom closet, pushing aside winter coats and old dresses to reach the back corner. There it was. A simple cardboard box sealed with packing tape. For Martha, written in James's neat engineer's handwriting. Beneath that, his final instruction to me. Open when you need guidance. How many times had I stood here over the past decade, fingers resting on that box, only to turn away? I told myself I was being strong, that I didn't need to reopen old wounds. Now I wondered if I'd simply been afraid of facing a future without the compass of his love. I carried the box to the bed, slicing the tape with scissors. The first item inside was an envelope with "Read me first" written across it. I opened it with trembling fingers. My dearest Martha. James's familiar handwriting blurred through my tears. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're facing something that's brought you to your knees. I know you, my love. You wouldn't open this unless you truly needed to. First, let me tell you what you already know, but may have forgotten. You are the strongest person I've ever known. When we met, I thought I was the capable one, the provider, the protector. How wrong I was. Your quiet strength has been the foundation of our family. Your resilience taught me what courage really means. Now, for what you don't know. I've kept a secret from you, my only secret in our marriage. Not out of deceit, but out of love. You remember when my company went public in '85? I told you I sold my shares to pay for Robert's college fund. That wasn't entirely true. I sold half of them. The other half I placed in a trust in your name, with specific instructions that you not be informed until after my death, and then only if you asked about it specifically. Why? Because I know you, Martha. You would have insisted we use that money for Robert's education, or for medical bills, or for 1,000 other practical needs. You would never have kept it for yourself. But some things are just for you, my love. Not for Robert, not for me, for you. In the investment portfolio, you'll find in this box, you'll see what became of those shares. My colleague Richard Thompson has managed them all these years, reinvesting dividends, making conservative but steady choices. By my calculations, you should be a wealthy woman by now. Use this freedom well, Martha. Live the life you deserve, Not the life others expect of you. Not the life that makes you smallest or quietest or most convenient. You always said I was the dreamer, but you were wrong. I merely dreamed out loud. Your dreams ran deeper, hidden even from yourself sometimes. It's time to unearth them. It's time to live for Martha. You always were the strongest of us both. Now it's time for the world to see that too. All my love, forever, James. I read the letter 3 times, tears flowing freely down my face. Then I emptied the rest of the box onto the bed. There were more letters, dozens of them, each labeled for different occasions. When Robert graduates, on your 65th birthday, when you feel alone. I set these aside, too raw to read more of James's words tonight. Next came photographs I'd never seen. James and me on our honeymoon, looking impossibly young. The 3 of us at the lake house we used to rent each summer. These weren't the posed portraits that made it into our family albums, but candid shots capturing genuine moments of joy. And beneath it all, a thick manila envelope from Thompson Financial Advisors. With shaking hands, I opened it. Statements, portfolios, account numbers. As I flipped through them, the numbers seemed unreal. 7 figures, more money than I'd ever imagined having. Technology stocks, blue-chip investments, municipal bonds, a diversified portfolio that had grown steadily for decades without my knowledge. There was a business card, paper-clipped to the front page. Richard Thompson, Senior Financial Advisor, and a handwritten note. Call anytime, Martha. James made me promise to help you when the time came. For the first time since the wedding, I felt something other than pain. I felt possibility. All these years, I'd defined myself solely as Robert's mother, James's widow, my patient's caregiver, never just Martha, never just me. The phone rang again. Robert. Again, I didn't answer. Instead, I picked up another envelope from the box, this one labeled simply, When Everything Changes. Inside was a photograph of James and me, standing on a beach at sunset. I was laughing, my head thrown back, while James looked at me with such love, it made my heart ache anew. On the back, he'd written, This is who you really are, Martha. Remember her? I studied the woman in the photograph, her dark hair lifting in the sea breeze, her posture radiating confidence and joy. There was no hint of the self-effacing, invisible woman I'd become. I reached for the phone, but not to call Robert back. Instead, I dialed the number on Richard Thompson's business card. Thompson Financial, a receptionist answered. This is Martha Sullivan, I said, my voice steadier than it had been all day. I believe Mr. Thompson has been managing an account for me. I'd like to schedule an appointment. Of course, Mrs. Sullivan. Mr. Thompson has a note in our system about you. He can see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. if that works for you. Tomorrow, a new day, perhaps the first day of a new life. That would be perfect, I said. I slept better that night than I had in months. Despite the earthquake that had shattered my understanding of my relationship with Robert, I felt strangely calm. When dawn broke, I was already awake, watching pink and gold light paint my bedroom ceiling. My first call that morning wasn't to Robert, though he'd left 3 more messages, each progressively more agitated about rescheduling the house situation. Instead, I called Mr. Patterson. Martha, I was concerned about you, he said. Are you feeling better? Much better, thank you, I replied. I need to cancel the property transfer, permanently. A pause. I see. May I ask what prompted this decision? I considered how much to share. Let's just say I overheard a conversation that made me reconsider whether this gift would be appreciated in the spirit it was intended. Well, as nothing has been signed, that's easily done. Would you like me to inform Robert, or will you handle that? I'll handle Robert, I said, surprising myself with my newfound assertiveness. But I'd like to schedule another appointment to discuss estate planning from a different angle. Of course. And Martha, I'm glad you're looking out for yourself. After that call, I dressed with unusual care for my meeting with Richard Thompson, choosing a tailored pantsuit I'd purchased years ago for a nursing conference, but rarely worn since. In the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. Without the slumped shoulders and apologetic posture I'd unconsciously adopted, I looked formidable. Thompson Financial occupied the top floor of one of Hartford's newer glass towers. The receptionist led me to a corner office with sweeping views of the Connecticut River. Richard Thompson rose to greet me, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. Martha Sullivan, after all these years, it's an honor to finally meet you. James spoke of you constantly. I wish I could say the same, I replied with a small smile. But it seems my husband kept quite a few secrets from me. Only one, really, Richard said, gesturing for me to sit, and he felt terrible about it. But he was adamant this money be preserved for your future, not Robert's education, not his medical bills, not any of the emergencies he knew you'd prioritize over yourself. He opened a leather portfolio on his desk. As of yesterday's market close, your portfolio is valued at $4.2 million. The number knocked the breath from me. That can't be right. James's initial investment was substantial, and I've been rather conservative in managing it. Over 30 years, even moderate returns compound impressively. He slid the portfolio across to me. Everything is here. Every transaction, every dividend, every growth projection. All this time, I whispered. I've been working double shifts, pinching pennies. While sitting on a small fortune, Richard finished. James knew you would. That's why he structured it this way. He wanted you to live your life as you naturally would, then have this revelation when the time was right. But how did he know when the time would be right? Richard's smile was gentle. He didn't. That's why he left it to you to open the box when you needed guidance. He trusted your instincts. I spent the next 2 hours with Richard, learning about my new financial reality. By the time I left his office, I had a clear understanding of my assets, a plan for restructuring some investments, and something I hadn't had in a very long time: options. My next stop was Mr. Patterson's law office, where I surprised him by asking for a referral. You're one of the best attorneys I know, I explained, but I think I need someone specialized in family estate management, someone who can help me navigate a complicated situation. He didn't seem offended. In fact, he looked almost relieved. I know exactly the right person. Eleanor Winters. She's a shark in a designer suit, specializes in protecting family assets, especially in contentious situations. Perfect, I said. Would you mind calling her for me? 2 days later, I sat across from Eleanor Winters in her downtown office. A woman in her 50s with a sleek gray bob and piercing blue eyes. She took notes as I explained my situation. The beach house, Robert's betrayal, my newfound financial independence. So to be clear, she said when I finished, you want to completely restructure your estate plan with specific protections in place. Yes, I want to maintain control of all my assets, including the beach house. I want to ensure I'm never dependent on my son's goodwill for my care. And I want to leave a legacy that reflects my values, not just handing everything to Robert unconditionally. She nodded approvingly. Many parents in your position would cave to guilt, even after such a betrayal. It's refreshing to see someone standing up for themselves. 2 weeks later, I received a troubling call from Catherine, the realtor who had handled my beach house purchase. Mrs. Sullivan, there's been an incident at your South Kingstown property. The security company found the back door open this morning. Nothing appears to be stolen, but some drawers were searched. I drove to Rhode Island immediately. The police had already gone, leaving only a report. When I checked the office, I discovered what was missing: the drawer containing all the original property documents. On my drive back, I stopped at a gas station and spotted Robert's BMW at the pump next to mine. He was arguing with Vanessa inside the car. I ducked into the store, watching through the window. The desperation written across their faces was clear. This was more than greed. It was panic. I called Eleanor from the parking lot. I need to understand better what's happening in my son's financial life. The next day, her investigator's report revealed an alarming story: underwater mortgages, substantial personal loans, maxed credit cards. Robert and Vanessa weren't just eager for the beach house. They were desperate. They've staked everything on getting that property, Eleanor explained. They've made financial commitments based on money they don't have. I was torn between anger at their manipulation and concern for my son. I called Richard Thompson. Richard, I need a favor. I want to create a trust fund with very specific conditions. With protective measures in place, I could now focus on my own transformation, not just in response to Robert's betrayal, but for the woman I wanted to become. On the 10th day, after what I'd come to think of as my awakening, I realized I needed more than legal and financial restructuring. I needed to rebuild myself. I found Dr. Chen through Eleanor's recommendation, a therapist who specialized in helping women reclaim their identities. When she asked what brought me to her office, I told her everything. It sounds like you're at a crossroads, she observed. After decades of defining yourself through your roles, mother, widow, caregiver, you're being asked to define yourself for yourself. I don't know if I remember how, I admitted. That's what we'll work on, she said. Not just processing the betrayal, but helping you rediscover who Martha Sullivan is when she's not sacrificing herself for others. I left that first session feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. On the drive home, I found myself following signs to the beach, ending up near my South Kingstown property. Standing there with the wind in my hair and salt on my lips, I felt something crystallize within me. No more diminishing, no more apologizing for existing, no more being a weight. It was time for Martha Sullivan to rise. 3 months can change everything, or nothing at all. In my case, it was definitely the former. February arrived with a snowstorm that blanketed Hartford in 8 inches of pristine white. From my living room window, I watched neighborhood children building snowmen, their laughter carrying through the frosted glass. 3 months ago, I might have spent the day baking cookies for them. Today, I had other plans. "You're sure about this?" Ellen Henderson asked as she drove us downtown through the slushy streets. "It's quite a change." "I'm sure," I replied, fingering my long gray hair, soon to be long gray hair no more. Ambiance salon was warm and fragrant with essential oils. Marco, the stylist Eleanor had recommended, circled me like an artist contemplating a blank canvas. "So," he said, meeting my eyes in the mirror, "you said you want to change. What kind of change are we talking about?" "I've worn my hair the same way since my husband died 10 years ago, I told him. "Before that, I wore it the way he liked it. Before that, I wore it the way my mother thought was appropriate. I've never once worn it the way I wanted." Marco's eyebrows rose. "And how do you want it?" I showed him a magazine photo I'd torn out. A stylish silver bob with side-swept bangs, shorter in the back, angled toward the face. Modern, confident. Nothing like the conservative style I'd worn for decades. "Can you do something like this?" His face lit up. "Honey, I can do better than that. I'm going to make you look amazing." 2 hours later, I emerged, transformed. The woman in the mirror looked 10 years younger and infinitely more self-possessed. My cheekbones were suddenly prominent, my eyes larger, my jawline defined. Most importantly, I recognized her, not as the Martha I'd been lately, but as the woman from the beach photograph James had kept. "Well?" Marco asked, clearly pleased with his work. "It's perfect," I said. "Absolutely perfect." The haircut was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I continued my transformation, inside and out. With guidance from a personal shopper at Nordstrom's, I discarded my shapeless, practical wardrobe in favor of well-tailored pieces that actually fit my body. Colors replaced the beiges and navies I'd hidden behind. A makeup consultant taught me simple techniques that enhanced rather than concealed. But the external changes were merely reflections of the deeper work happening within. "What did you love to do before life got in the way?" Dr. Chen had asked during our 3rd session. I'd had to think about it. "I used to paint. Watercolors mostly. Landscapes." "And when did you stop?" "When Robert was born. There wasn't time, and then it seemed frivolous." Dr. Chen's expression had been gentle but challenging. Frivolous to whom? The question followed me home, nagging at my conscience until I found myself driving to an art supply store the next day. I returned with watercolor paper, professional-grade paints, and brushes that felt both foreign and familiar in my hands. My first attempts were hesitant, clumsy things, but by the 3rd try, muscle memory began to return. By the 10th painting, I was losing hours in the focused flow of creativity, emerging only when the light changed or my stomach reminded me to eat. I joined a local art class at the community center. There, I met Sophia, a fellow widow who'd reinvented herself after her husband's death by opening a small gallery featuring local artists. When she saw my work, she offered surprising encouragement. "You have a distinctive style," she told me. "Your use of light is unusual, melancholy, but beautiful. Would you consider showing a few pieces in my spring exhibition?" I'd laughed, thinking she was being kind. "I'm just a beginner." Again. "Art isn't about technical perfection," she'd replied. "It's about what you communicate, and you're communicating something worth hearing." Through Sophia, I discovered the women's shelter where she volunteered. New Horizons provided safe housing for women fleeing domestic violence, many of them older women who'd endured decades of abuse before finding the courage to leave. Their stories resonated with me, not because James had ever been abusive, but because I recognized the self-erasure, the constant accommodation. Many of these women need to rebuild identities that were systematically dismantled, explained the shelter director. They need to rediscover who they are apart from their abusers. I understand that process, I told her, more than you might think. Soon, I was volunteering twice a week, helping women navigate social services, teaching basic financial literacy, or sometimes just listening. It was different from my hospital nursing, less physical care, more emotional support, but it drew on the same wellspring of compassion that had defined my career. Through all of this, Robert continued his campaign of calls and texts. They'd evolved from demanding to concerned to manipulative. "Mom, we need to talk about the house. Mom, are you sick? Should I come check on you? Mom, I'm sorry for whatever I did. Please just call me." And finally, the nuclear option. "Mom, I'm worried about your mental state. Maybe we should look into having someone check on you regularly." That last message had sent me straight to Eleanor's office. "He's laying groundwork," she'd warned, "suggesting you're not competent. It's a common tactic when adult children want control of assets." So I'd finally answered one of his calls, keeping it brief and composed. "I'm perfectly fine, Robert. I've been busy with new projects and commitments, and I've decided to keep the beach house for now. It's not up for discussion. But Mom, my decision is final. I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk further." One afternoon, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. I opened it to find Vanessa standing alone on my porch, something unprecedented. "May I come in?" she asked, looking uncharacteristically uncertain without her usual designer outfit and perfect makeup. Over coffee, she revealed a side of herself I'd never seen. "I grew up with nothing," she told me. Literally nothing. My mother was a waitress raising 3 kids alone after my father left. I remember eating macaroni with ketchup for weeks because it was all we could afford. Robert had never mentioned this aspect of her background. "I promised myself I'd never be poor again," she continued. "The beach house wasn't just greed, it was security. For someone who grew up like I did, tangible assets mean you'll never have to choose between paying rent or buying food." I wasn't absolving her actions, but for the first time, I saw beyond the perfectly polished daughter-in-law who had built a facade as careful as my own. "Robert's in trouble, Martha. Financial troubles, yes, but beyond that too. He's lost, between the man his father was and the man he thought he needed to be." After she left, I called Eleanor and made some adjustments to the trust fund I'd created. Not to give in, but to acknowledge the full humanity behind the conflict, theirs and mine. Through Eleanor, I also arranged to list the beach house discreetly with Catherine. If I decided to sell, it would be on my terms, to buyers who would appreciate it. On a cold March afternoon, I returned from the women's shelter to find Robert's BMW in my driveway. My stomach tightened, but I'd known this confrontation was inevitable. He stared at me as I approached, shock evident on his face. "Mom, you look different." "I've made some changes," I said, unlocking the door. He followed me inside, taking in other changes: the easel by the window, the colorful throw pillows, the absence of the aging family photos that had cluttered every surface. "What's going on?" he asked. "First you cancel the house transfer, then you practically disappear. Now you've—" He gestured vaguely at all of me. "Done this makeover thing." I handed him a mug of coffee. "Not just a makeover, Robert. A reclamation." "A what?" "I'm reclaiming my life, my identity. The person I was before, I became simply Robert's mother." He frowned. "Is this because of what I said at the wedding? I told you I was drunk, stressed?" "It's because of many things," I interrupted. "That was just the catalyst that helped me see clearly." "See what clearly?" "That I deserve more than to be your afterthought," I said quietly. "That I've spent decades putting you first, only to discover you see me as a burden to be managed. So this is, what, punishment?" I shook my head. "This is growth. For the first time in decades, I'm living for myself, not as your support system, not as James's widow, but as Martha Sullivan, a woman with her own desires, talents, and worth." Robert stared at me as if I'd started speaking in tongues. "I don't understand what's happening here." "I know," I said, and for the first time I felt a genuine pang of sadness for him. "That's part of the problem." "When will things go back to normal?" he asked, something almost childlike in his confusion. "They won't," I replied gently. "Normal has changed." April arrived with a riot of daffodils and cherry blossoms. I'd always loved spring, the promise of renewal, the lengthening days, the world shaking off winter's constraints. This year the season felt particularly symbolic. Catherine called on a Tuesday morning with news. I have an offer on the beach house, Martha. It's significantly above asking price. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. Above asking? But we listed it at market value. The Jacobsons fell in love with it, she explained. They have 3 children and have been searching for a waterfront property for years. When they saw the sunset from your porch, Mrs. Jacobson started crying. They don't want to risk losing it in a bidding war. The amount she named made my breath catch. It was nearly double what I'd paid for the property, enough to fund several of the dreams I'd begun to nurture. I told them you'd need 48 hours to consider, Catherine continued. They're eager but understand it's a big decision. After we hung up, I walked to my newly created studio space in what had once been Robert's bedroom. The morning light streamed through the east-facing windows, illuminating the watercolor I'd been working on, a seascape inspired by the view from the beach house. I'd planned to hang it there someday. Now I had a choice to make. Keep the house as my own sanctuary, or sell it and use the proceeds to expand my horizons in ways I hadn't yet imagined. I called Dr. Chen and scheduled an emergency session. "What's holding you back?" she asked after I explained my dilemma. "Is it concern about Robert's reaction? Guilt about selling a property you once intended for him?" I considered this. No, it's more that the house represented a dream, freedom, security, a future I controlled. And now? Now I have those things already, I realized. The house was a symbol of the life I wanted, but I'm already building that life. Maybe the house can serve a different purpose now. That evening, I called Catherine and accepted the Jacobsons' offer. On one condition, I added. I want to meet them before we close. I want to know the family who'll be making memories there. 2 days later, I met the Jacobsons for coffee. David was a professor of marine biology. Sarah ran a children's bookstore. Their children, ages 10, 8, and 6, had made me cards with crayon drawings of what they planned to do at their beach. The youngest had drawn a mermaid that looked suspiciously like me, complete with silver hair. "We can't thank you enough for accepting our offer," Sarah said. "This house means everything to us. Take care of it," I told them. "Fill it with laughter and love. That's all I ask." As I drove home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The house had served its purpose, not as Robert's inheritance, but as the key to my independence. The following weekend, I attended my regular volunteer shift at New Horizons. Usually I worked with the residents directly, but today Sophia had asked me to join a planning meeting for their expansion project. "We've outgrown our current space," she explained as we gathered in the small conference room. "Too many women need our services, especially older women who've spent decades in controlling relationships." 6 of us sat around the table. Sophia, the shelter director, 2 board members, a city grant coordinator, and me. "The problem is funding," the director explained. "We've identified a perfect property, a former small hotel that could be converted to provide twice our current capacity, plus dedicated spaces for counseling, job training, and children's services. But we're millions short." "How short?" I asked. The grant coordinator named a figure that made everyone at the table sigh. "Unless we find a major donor in the next 30 days, we'll lose our option on the property," Sophia added. "It's so frustrating to be this close." I felt something stir inside me, a purpose taking shape, a path becoming clear. "What if you had a donor?" I asked quietly. All eyes turned to me. "Do you know someone who might be interested?" the director asked hopefully. "Yes," I replied. "Me." The silence that followed was broken by Sophia's incredulous laugh. "Martha, that's very sweet, but we're talking about serious money here." "I know exactly what we're talking about," I said calmly. "I've recently sold a property for a substantial profit. I've been looking for the right investment for those funds." "We couldn't possibly ask you to," the director began. "You're not asking," I interrupted. "I'm offering, but I'd like to propose something specific. Instead of just a shelter, what if we created a foundation focused on women over 50 who need to rebuild their lives? Women with decades of wisdom and capability who just need resources and support to reclaim their independence?" The spark in their eyes told me they understood immediately. This was a demographic often overlooked in support services. Women like me, like many I'd met at the shelter, who had survived long enough to recognize their own value but needed practical help to act on that recognition. Over the next 2 hours, our discussion transformed from managing scarcity to imagining possibility. By the time we left, the outlines of the Second Spring Foundation had taken shape, a comprehensive program that would provide shelter, financial counseling, career retraining, legal support, and community. As I drove home that evening, the setting sun painted the horizon in brilliant oranges and pinks. I thought about Robert, who still hadn't grasped the magnitude of the change in our relationship. He'd called twice more, each time circling back to the beach house, still unable to comprehend that my priorities had fundamentally shifted. I hadn't told him about the sale. That conversation would come soon enough. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "I still can't believe what happened today. You're changing lives, Martha, including your own." I smiled as I pulled into my driveway. After decades of making myself small to accommodate others, I had finally given myself permission to live largely. Richard had helped me establish a solid plan for the beach house proceeds, part for the foundation, part for my own security and future care, and a portion set aside in a special trust for Robert with specific conditions that Eleanor had helped craft. The irony wasn't lost on me. Only by refusing to be diminished had I discovered how much I had to give. The aroma of roasting turkey filled my house as I arranged a centerpiece of autumn flowers and miniature pumpkins. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday, a celebration of gratitude without the commercial pressures of Christmas. But this year felt different, charged with an energy that was both exciting and nerve-wracking. For the first time in 3 years, Robert and Vanessa were actually coming. Their acceptance of my invitation had surprised me, but not as much as their sudden availability after years of being too busy to make the trip. "They've realized the beach house sale is real," Eleanor had said with a knowing smile when I told her. "They want to assess the situation, see if they can salvage anything from their plans." The doorbell rang precisely at 4 o'clock. Robert was nothing if not punctual, a trait he'd inherited from James. I smoothed my burgundy cashmere dress, checked my reflection once more, and opened the door with a genuine smile. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said, welcoming them inside. Robert's double-take was subtle, but unmistakable. In the 7 months since his last visit, my transformation had continued. The confidence I'd found internally now radiated outward. "Mom," he said, awkwardly leaning in for a hug, "you look, well." Vanessa hung back, her smile tight as she handed me a bottle of wine. "Your home looks different." "I've made some changes," I replied, accepting the bottle. "Come in, the others should be arriving shortly." Robert froze halfway through removing his coat. "Others? I thought this was just a family dinner." "I've expanded my definition of family," I explained, hanging their coats in the closet. "The Hendersons are coming? My neighbors? You've met them before? And Sophia from the foundation and Mr. Patterson. A few other friends." Robert and Vanessa exchanged a look I pretended not to notice. This wasn't the intimate setting they'd expected, one that would allow them to corner me about financial matters. "Why don't you relax in the living room while I finish up in the kitchen?" I suggested. "There's wine open on the coffee table." As they moved toward the living room, I heard Vanessa's whispered, "She redecorated everything. Even your father's chair is gone." The familiar leather recliner had indeed been replaced by a pair of elegant armchairs that better suited the room's new aesthetic. I'd donated James's chair to a veterans' home where I knew it would be appreciated, after carefully preserving a few items with sentimental value. The rest I'd released, making space for my evolving life. The doorbell rang again, heralding the arrival of the Hendersons, followed quickly by Sophia and her partner Helen. Mr. Patterson arrived with a homemade pecan pie, and 2 of my new friends from the art class completed our gathering. Dinner was a lively affair. Around my expanded dining table, conversation flowed easily. Sophia shared updates about the foundation, which had already helped 7 women transition to independent living situations. Tom Henderson described his recent retirement and new passion for birdwatching. Helen, a retired literature professor, debated the merits of various mystery novelists with Mr. Patterson. Through it all, Robert and Vanessa sat like visitors from another planet, struggling to find their footing in this unfamiliar version of their mother's life. Several times, Robert attempted to steer the conversation toward the beach house. "I drove by the property in South Kingstown last month," he mentioned casually during a lull. "Looked like there was some activity there." "The new owners are doing some renovations," I replied easily, passing the cranberry sauce. "The Jacobsons, lovely family with 3 children. They've already sent me photos of their oldest learning to surf." The color drained from Robert's face. "New owners? You sold it?" "In April," I confirmed. "They fell in love with it immediately." Sophia, would you pass the rolls, please? As conversation resumed around us, I could feel Robert's stunned silence like a physical presence. Vanessa's hand closed over his wrist, her fingernails digging visibly into his skin. Later, as guests helped clear dishes between dinner and dessert, I overheard Robert and Vanessa in heated whispers from the guest bathroom, their voices carrying through the old heating vent into the kitchen. She sold it. She actually sold it. Robert's voice was tight with disbelief. After all that talk about it being our inheritance, our future, something's going on with her, Vanessa replied. Have you seen how she's dressing? The furniture? These friends suddenly everywhere? She's having some kind of breakdown or midlife crisis. She's 71. That's hardly midlife. Whatever it is, we need to figure it out. The house money has to be somewhere. We need that money, Robert. I know, Robert hissed. But look at her, she's not the same person. She used to be manageable. The word hung in the air like a slap. Manageable. Is that how my son had seen me all these years? Not as a person with my own desires and agency, but as something to be managed. We need to get her alone, Vanessa continued. This crowd wasn't an accident. She's avoiding a real conversation about the money. The following morning, I took my usual early walk through the park near my home. The air was crisp, the grass still frosted. As I rounded the lake, I spotted Robert sitting alone on a bench, staring at the water with reddened eyes. Robert? I approached cautiously. He turned, startled. Mom, what are you doing here? Morning walk. And you? He shrugged. Couldn't sleep at the hotel. I sat beside him, keeping a respectful distance. For several minutes, we watched the mist hover over the lake in silence. Vanessa and I fought all night, he finally said, his voice hoarse. About the house, about you, about money, about everything. I'm sorry, I replied, and truly was. Despite everything, I never wished unhappiness for my son. He gave a bitter laugh. You were right, you know. About the house. We were going to sell it immediately. We even had a buyer lined up. I know. He looked at me surprised. How? I have my resources now, I answered simply. Robert sighed deeply. What happened to us, Mom? When did I become this? He gestured to himself with evident disgust. We're in trouble, he said abruptly. Financial? Serious? I thought as much. Loans, mortgages. We gambled everything on the beach house. He rubbed his face. It was stupid, reckless. We took on debt based on money we didn't have. Why not ask me for help directly? His laugh was bitter. And admit I failed? That I needed my mother to rescue me? After I tried so hard to prove I was... He stopped, realizing what he was about to say. Better than me? I completed gently. He hunched his shoulders, shame evident on his face. Come with me, I said, standing. I want to show you something. At the foundation office, I handed him a file containing details of the trust fund I'd established with part of the beach house proceeds. It would help with his immediate debts, but came with strict conditions: mandatory financial counseling, complete transparency, and regular community service at the Foundation's financial literacy program. Why would you do this after everything we did? He asked, staring at the documents in disbelief. Because you're my son, I replied simply, and because I believe you can be better than your worst decisions. As I watched him drive away, a file tucked under his arm, I wondered if I'd made the right decision. The trust wasn't a blank check. It was an opportunity for growth, if he chose to take it. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Vanessa, simply titled, "Thank you." She wrote that she and Robert had decided to separate temporarily, each needing to find their own path forward. The snow had begun to fall as I closed my laptop. The foundation was on solid footing, my own future secure, and a seed of potential change planted in my son. For the first time in decades, I was walking my path on my own terms. December arrived with a dusting of snow and the familiar pressure of holiday expectations. The Second Spring Foundation was thriving. We'd secured the former hotel property and renovations were well underway. My days were filled with purpose, committee meetings, art classes I now taught rather than just attended, and deepening friendships. I was arranging pine boughs on my mantel when my doorbell rang, an unexpected sound on a Tuesday morning. Through the peephole, I saw Robert shifting nervously on my front step, collar turned up against the cold. For a moment, I considered not answering. Our Thanksgiving encounter had ended unresolved, and I'd enjoyed the peaceful week since, but avoidance solved nothing, and I'd long since stopped running from difficult conversations. "Robert," I said, opening the door. "This is a surprise. Can we talk?" He didn't wait for an invitation, stepping past me into the foyer. Privately, somewhere without an audience this time. His tone held an accusatory edge that immediately set me on guard. "There's a cafe 2 blocks down. Let's walk there." I deliberately chose a public setting, partly on Eleanor's advice to always meet in places where others could witness our interactions, partly because I knew Robert would be less likely to create a scene. The cafe was busy with morning customers, but we found a corner table away from the main traffic. Robert ordered black coffee. I chose Earl Grey tea. We sat in awkward silence until our drinks arrived. "I'm listening," I said finally, warming my hands on the teacup. Robert stared into his coffee. "I want to know why you're doing this. The real reason, not some line about finding yourself or whatever." "That is the real reason," I replied. "Sometimes the simplest explanation is true. So this has nothing to do with punishing me for what I said at the wedding." I sighed. "Robert, not everything is about you." He looked up, startled. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that my choices aren't a reaction to you. They're about me, about how I want to live the remaining years of my life. But the timing is connected to what I overheard, yes. Hearing you and Vanessa discuss me as a problem to solve was illuminating. But my response wasn't about punishment. It was about finally seeing clearly how one-sided our relationship had become." Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Look, what you heard, it wasn't like that. We were just talking, exploring options that involved selling the home I spent decades saving for and putting me in a state facility to maximize your profit," I said calmly. "Those were your exact words, Robert. Solve your mom problem." The color drained from his face. "I didn't mean—" "You did," I interrupted gently. "And that's okay. It showed me where I truly stood in your life, not as someone to be loved or respected, but as a resource to be managed." A woman at the next table glanced over, then quickly looked away when she caught my eye. "You've always been so selfless," Robert said, leaning forward. "Everything for me, for Dad, for everyone else. That's who you are, Mom." "No," I corrected. "That's who I was conditioned to be. The perfect mother, the supportive wife, the woman who never inconveniences anyone. But beneath all those roles was a person, a complete human being with dreams and desires of her own. So now you're just, what? Living for yourself? Spending the beach house money on clothes and furniture?" His gesture toward my camel hair coat carried undisguised judgment. "Among other things," I agreed, refusing to be baited. "I've also established a foundation for women rebuilding their lives after trauma or loss. I'm teaching art classes. I'm traveling to the national parks I've always wanted to see. I'm living a full life, Robert." He stared at me as if I were speaking a language he couldn't quite translate. "But what about us? What about your family?" "What about us?" I echoed. "Tell me honestly, Robert, before the beach house situation, when was the last time you called me just to check how I was doing? Not to ask for something, not out of obligation, but because you genuinely cared about my happiness?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "I still love you," I said more softly. "You're my son. Nothing changes that. But love without respect isn't healthy for either of us. So that's it? You're just moving on?" There was genuine bewilderment in his voice. "I'm moving forward," I corrected. "And you're welcome to be part of my life, my real life. Not the convenience I represented before, but only if you can see me as a whole person, not just your mother." Robert's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me with new urgency. "The beach house money. What did you do with it? Was it really all spent on this foundation thing?" So that was why he'd come. Not reconciliation, not understanding, but a last attempt to salvage something from his failed plan. "My financial decisions are no longer your concern," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "I've made provisions for my future care that don't involve being warehoused in a state facility. Beyond that, what I do with my resources is my business." "But what about our future? Vanessa and I were counting on that money for the house in Westport, for starting a family eventually." I was confused. "I thought you and Vanessa had separated. At least that's what her email suggested." He flushed. "It's complicated. We're trying to work things out. The trust fund you set up helps, but it's not enough for what we had planned." Now I understood. He had accepted the trust fund with its conditions, but was still hoping for more. still seeing me primarily as a source of financial support. I spent 30 years counting on having a son who valued me for more than my assets, I replied. We both faced disappointment. Robert's expression hardened. Is this how it's going to be now? You holding the past over my head forever? No, I said, finishing my tea. This is me establishing healthy boundaries, something I should have done decades ago. Mom, he tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. After everything we've been through, everything you and Dad sacrificed for me, you really would deny your only son a better future? I'm not denying you anything, Robert. I'm finally giving myself the respect I deserve. I stood, placing money for our drinks on the table. When you're ready to build a relationship based on mutual respect rather than what you can get from me, I'll be here. As I walked home through the light snow, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and liberation. The conversation had gone exactly as Eleanor had predicted. The progression from guilt to accusation to outright demand. But something unexpected had happened too. For the first time, I'd faced Robert's manipulation without crumbling, without that instinctive maternal urge to smooth things over at my own expense. I'd held my ground, maintained my boundaries, and walked away with my dignity intact. The snow was falling more heavily now, transforming the familiar streets of my neighborhood into something magical and new. Like my life, I thought. Recognizable in its outlines, but utterly transformed in its substance. I was also starting to consider a more significant change. Yesterday, I'd seen a lovely cottage for sale in coastal Maine. Perhaps it was time for a fresh start in a new place, somewhere without the weight of old memories. The idea of waking up to ocean views every morning, of painting on a deck overlooking the Atlantic, was beginning to take hold in my imagination. The winter ahead might be cold, but spring would come again. And this time, I would meet it as my complete self. Christmas lights transformed Hartford into a glittering wonderland as December deepened. I'd always loved the holidays, even in the lean years after James died, when I'd worked extra shifts to ensure Robert had presents under our modest tree. This year, I was experiencing the season with new eyes, not as an orchestrator of others' joy, but as an active participant in my own. The Second Spring Foundation's holiday fundraising gala was scheduled for Christmas Eve at the Hartford Hilton. As the founding donor, I'd been deeply involved in the planning, determined to make our first major public event both meaningful and successful. The ticket sales have exceeded our expectations, Sophia told me as we finalized arrangements. The mayor's attending, along with several state representatives. The Hartford Courant is covering it. This is going to put us on the map, Martha. I studied the seating chart, making small adjustments. Did we hear back from Channel 8 about filming the speech segment? Confirmed yesterday. They'll run it on the late news and again on Christmas morning. Perfect, I said, feeling a flutter of nervous excitement. While I'd grown more comfortable speaking at our board meetings and donor luncheons, this would be my first time addressing hundreds of people, and potentially thousands more via television.